So hello everybody and welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of ARBinBRIEF, a practical video guide on hand-picked arbitration issues. I'm Emily Hay, counsel at Anotio and Vandenberg and member of the ARBinBRIEF team. ARBinBRIEF videos offer a quick resource to consult on issues that arise in international arbitration while showcasing talented arbitrators in an interview format. Over the course of 10 episodes in the first season, we will move through the life cycle of an arbitration. Today, we start with the beginning of the arbitration life cycle with arbitrator appointments. For those of us joining live, the 15-minute interview will be followed by 15 minutes of Q&A with Wendy and Jennifer. Please send any questions through by the Q&A function, and during the Q&A, anyone who wants to will be invited to turn on their cameras. I'm now honored to introduce our stellar arbitrators. Wendy is at 20 Essex in London, where she advises on international law matters and has conducted arbitrations as counsel and as arbitrator under all the major institutional rules. She is admitted to practice in New Zealand and in England and Wales. Jennifer is associated partner at NUR in Düsseldorf, where she focuses on national and international litigation and arbitration, including as counsel and as arbitrator. She is admitted to practice in Germany and in California. Over to you now, Wendy and Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you to ARBinBRIEF and to Delos for giving us this opportunity. Welcome, Jennifer or Dr. Bryant. It's such a pleasure and a treat to have this opportunity to interview you, and welcome, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of those participants wherever you may be. So Jennifer, how about we start at the start, could you set out just briefly for me, but also for all of our participants, they all know of you, but how did you start off as your career in international arbitration?
Well, thank you, Wendy, and of course, also hello from my side. Thanks to ARBinBRIEF for this great opportunity. When I think back when I started in international arbitration, I did so as probably many did before me and after. I participated in the Wismut, and I sort of got hooked with international arbitration. So it came naturally to me to pursue that kind of career. I worked with an institution for a while, with the German Arbitration Institute, and then I went to private practice, and I still am in a law firm that predominantly does complex litigation and arbitration. And then after a while working in that field as counsel and as secretary to the tribunals, sort of also logically, I would hope at least, the first appointments came through. And that was basically through the institutions. So not directly appointed or nominated by parties of the council, but in case the institutions had to nominate or had to appoint an arbitrator, those were my first arbitrator appointments.
So how much do you think it helped you to have been in the institution in that early part of your career, either in terms of knowing how the appointment process worked, so where to put yourself, but also becoming known to the council or the institutions or the co-arbitrators who might be making those decisions? How valuable was that?
I think that was one piece in the puzzle, one stone in that whole path of career. It was good to, as you said, to get to know case managers and get to know how the institution works. But many of them may work in a similar way. So for that, I think it was very good, and to take the first baby steps at events and meeting other people. And then the next step was going out there when I was a practitioner, or started as a practitioner, to attend events, to meet those case managers again, but also to meet other counsel, to meet other lawyers, just to get acquainted with the whole system and with my peers.
So talk us through, starting with Dees, how does the appointment mechanism work? How do they appoint arbitrators?
They have a sort of two-tiered mechanism. The nomination works through the parties, both in case of a sole arbitrator or in case of a three arbitrator panel. And in the latter case, each party nominates sort of their respective party-appointed arbitrator, and then those two party-appointed arbitrators nominate the president, and all of them are virtually or practically appointed by the institution. But in case there is a disagreement when it comes to a sole arbitrator or the president, or in case one of the parties does not nominate their own arbitrator for lack of knowledge or for lack of participation in the arbitration, the institution steps in and makes that appointment for and also nomination for the parties. And that's where usually younger practitioners get their first chances.
And is there any institutional filtering or vetting that you've seen that goes on either from within the institution or in your experience outside?
Well, I would say in terms of availability, that's something that I've seen throughout the last 10 plus years that I've been working in international arbitration. For example, take the ICC. They ask you if you accept an appointment, how your availability is and how many cases you're handling right now. And I think that's something. That vetting process is something that's gradually taking place now also in other institutions, just to make sure that the person who is nominated and appointed really has all the traits and all the capacities that they really need.
We'll come back. I want to ask you how important you think that is, that criterion is when you're choosing a chair. But before we get there, of course, the other vetting step is in relation to disclosure, independence and impartiality. Interested to know, well, how do you understand the standard of disclosure to apply across institutional rules? And just because we're here with Delos and they've helped us to bring you to this audience, maybe with a particular reference to the Delos rules. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's Article 6.2 of the Delos rules. But across Delos, but also other institutional rules, how do you see the standard of disclosure in relation to independence and impartiality?
I think you can see, different nuances, I want to say, gradually, and with a particular reference to Delos. I think they're sort of on the stricter end when it comes to disclosure. But often what you see is qualifications, usually in case of doubt in the eyes of the parties, that's something that requires a disclosure. And then sometimes you see the qualification of justifiable doubt, as is in the Delos rules. Sometimes you see reasonable doubts. I think the ICC rules, under the DIS rules, they refer to a reasonable person who has doubts. So I think it's the standard may vary, in nuances, but basically, and I really like to take this as a rule of thumb, is if you look into the IBA rules, for example, when in doubt, you should disclose. And I think that's really just a guideline. If there's any fact where you just spend a minute of thinking, should I disclose this? That should give you a hint that probably it's something that the parties would be interested in. And that doesn't mean, not at all, to say that you are not impartial or independent, not at all. It's just it says that that's something you disclose, and then the parties have the full picture and have a very good feeling working with you.
Yeah. So, and of course, when it's a subjective test like the Delos one, when it's in the eyes of the parties, it's quite difficult for you to make that assessment of what the parties would or wouldn't be concerned about if you don't tell them, right?
Exactly. Same again, what you have to do is you have to put the positions position of the parties. And I think if I were them, if I were their counsel, you know, since many of us are lawyers, what would I recommend them? What would I think? And I think that is just something, if you're outright and honest with yourself and you say, well, this is a fact, I would like to know that as a party or as a party representative, and then I could work with that. That is just, I think, when you should disclose.
In your experience, either in your own disclosure or disclosure of your co-arbitrators, has it been your experience that parties have generally said, okay, fine, to the points that have been disclosed, or do they open up sort of a procedure for challenge?
Actually, I've seen any shade in that toolbox, or in that box of color. In oftentimes, I really have experience, especially when it comes to arbitrators that are well-known, well-reputed. And if the outset is not extremely full of conflicts anyways, and you see that one party just wants to pick a fight no matter what. I have seen quite a few times that parties were fine with the disclosures because, you know, objectively and subjectively, they were okay. You know, it was, often you have big law firms, and then, you know, one disclosure would be a partner of mine in another office has worked on a matter that I have not known about. I don't know the details of the matter. It was an M&A transaction, for example. So something that's really completely different from the matter of the arbitration, and something where the arbitrator can assure this is not a key client of ours. This is not something what we expect, you know, repeated retention. And I think then that's fine. I see that in my firm as well. I don't know what my partners do in the other offices unless I really take a deep dive into our conflict system.
So mechanistically, how do you go about, if you're choosing a chair with your co-arbitrator, taking into account the points you raise about availability and independence and impartiality, but how do you pick the person that you want chairing your tribunals as co-arbitrator?
So I would be interested in someone, actually I would also be interested in, if I were a counsel, someone who's reliable in the first place, that I preferably know, that I have a good relationship with, or at least I could imagine to have a good relationship with, someone who is somewhat experienced, because as a chair, you know, there are certain tasks that you need to take on that you should have done or seen before. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should have done that as an arbitrator. You could have done that as a secretary as well, but you need to have some arbitration experience as a chair, I would say. And then also someone who's knowledgeable in whatever substantive issues are at stake. That would also be helpful. But I think really someone who has arbitration experience is great, and someone who has the capacity to really work on the case.
And then what's the process? How do you go about it? And do you talk to the parties? Do you talk to counsel? Do you talk to the other co-arbitrator? Or do you talk to the institution? How do you go about who you might suggest or choose?
Mm-hmm. It was an interesting thought. I've never talked to the institution, I think, before in that process. They just sort of get the end result. I would say it's different depending really on each case. Sometimes it's really that I've talked to counsel before when they nominated me, that they already had some candidates in mind, and then of course I'm open to that. I'm listening to them and try to accommodate and listen to their suggestions. Sometimes it's just if I have a very good working relationship with the other co-arbitrator, for example, and maybe the party has not expressed their interest to be involved very deeply. Sometimes it's just easier and it flows better if you talk to the co-arbitrator first and just see if you have some common ground, if you have some common ideas, maybe about a candidate or two, and then you just go back to the parties with 2 or 3 suggestions. And then sometimes we also work with, complex, long and short lists where the parties can scratch off a certain amount of candidates and then rank the rest. And then you would just have a mathematical nomination process.
Okay. Have you ever had to do that more than once?
Yes.
Right, with the list, it's an absolute wipeout. Start again.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
yes, especially when you think you have a candidate and then it turns out that they are conflicted or don't have the capacity, and then you just have to start all over again.
I'm conscious of our very brief time, so I think we'll wrap things up here. I wanted to thank Wendy and Jennifer so much for this incredibly insightful discussion and for kicking off season 1 of episode 1 on such a strong note. Thanks also to our partner organizations, Delos, Mundi, and 𝗔𝗕𝗙𝗙 for their invaluable support. Delos Dispute Resolution is an independent arbitral institution established in 2014 to respond to the needs of businesses globally for time and cost efficiency in the resolution of disputes through arbitration. Mundi provides products for legal professionals using AI-powered technology, and one of those products is a directory of more than 5,000 arbitrator profiles searchable by many different filters. And if your profile is in the directory, you can enhance it with your photo and your CV. And the 𝗔𝗕𝗙𝗙 establishes concrete and actionable steps to increase the number of women appointed as arbitrators with the ultimate goal of full parity. So to see future episodes of ARBinBRIEF, please follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We would love to hear your comments and your feedback, and you can register for our next episode on www.arbinbrief.com.